This is Progressive Insider Presents, the Quick Report with Don Ford. I am Don Ford. Thank you for opening my video. If you are seeing this, it's probably not live, though if you jumped in here real fast, you might hear that and be like, what, this isn't live? And you're like, no, it is. But anyways, the point is that this is an AMA sort of talk at you, strategy discussion, where we talk about the movement, all kinds of other complicated things going on. We've been doing this for a couple years now, so we're just going to keep doing it. So you guys like my video, please give it a share, like Progressive Insider, like the Critical Report Facebook page, which I've done exactly 0 for. And we are going to get going here in 1 second. Got some interesting names jumping in here already. I cannot stress enough how important it is that everyone continue little COVID-19 as we jump in, get people in here. I cannot stress enough, it's now coming out in California that there should be, everyone should be wearing cloth masks. So if you're not wearing a cloth mask and you're going out and you're doing all this stuff, it's super, super irresponsible. So just keep that in mind. Please, 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 to be responsible right now because it could really save lives. Also, I do want to say that if you are making a campaign, I cannot stress enough how every call we're doing is a solidarity call of some kind. Before you call and talk to someone about voting, you're calling to ask how they're doing. I put up a huge list of all different kinds of relief groups from all over the country because we're not trying to just elect a president, right? We're trying to also help people along the way. So it's really important that we keep that in mind, that we're trying to fight for someone we don't know or improve the quality of life for someone we'll never meet. The idea is that it doesn't just start with getting people to vote. We have to make sure they're taken care of. So I got some people in here, so let's get going. If you do like what I'm doing, by the way, I have to do the plug. It's the beginning of the month. We're all hurting. Donations are still a thing. So I am going to see if I can apply for the unemployment, which everyone, I also posted a thing about applying for the unemployment as a gig worker, and it's pretty freaking loose. So even if you don't qualify for unemployment, you could still qualify for that extra $600. So it's definitely worth going to, even if you hadn't been employed, or like for me, I'm self-employed because I do it like this, so it's all covered that way. So let's talk about the convention. The convention has moved. The convention moved from from July to August, and a lot of people are kind of scoffing at, August. I do think that by August we should be able to leave our houses. Am I sure we're going to have travel to a convention somewhere? I don't know. That's a little up in the air, and that's going to come down to state laws and all kinds of things that are going to happen. So the idea of whether or not there will be a physical convention is still very, very up in the air. But the convention being moved is giving us the best possible timeline. Now, this does a couple of interesting things. Number one of the big complaints that I had about them moving the convention up is we had a month less to fundraise. Even though fundraising is going to be like pulling teeth to get kind of delegates there, we have an extra month for fundraising. That's number one. Number two, people have been asking me a lot, can they move the June 9th deadline? Now, I'm sure you've noticed, that the, someone just tried the gig option, by the way, going about the gig option thing, you have to click self-employed. There's a whole workaround. So, and if they don't have it up on their site yet, they will. Every state is handling it a little differently. So that's real. So back to the convention rules. So a lot of people are talking about the June 9th thing. And the June 9th thing is because if you've noticed, I proposed and everyone saw it. And it wasn't me, but everyone saw it was the best state in the rules. To move the elections to June 2nd. The reason June 2nd is a good date is because the June 9th deadline is not a deadline to actually hold the election. It's a deadline to give your initial delegate estimates to the DNC. They can change after that point still. They can change right after the convention, depending on how votes are certified. But that June 9th deadline is an initial process. So anyone that holds their primary or gives initial delegate numbers after June 9th risks having their delegates cut in half. And people go, Don, can't they change this rule? Well, that's a little complicated. Yes, theoretically you can change any rule, but I've spent several months explaining the superdelegate rule and talking about how hard it would be to change. And just for a quick breakdown, you have to have an emergency meeting of the rules and bylaws. It would have to meet digitally, which they can do that. They'd have to meet digitally and agree to reopen the rules. They would have to reopen the rules and change the one rule. No other rules, just that one rule. And see, the thing is, if they change any other rules, they could change the superdelegate rule, they could change the timing of the convention, they could change freaking anything at that point. And actually, there's a part of me that isn't afraid of them bringing back superdelegates this time around, and I'm going to get to that in a second, which is going to be the craziest turn of events that I think everyone is unprepared for. But what it's all coming around to is this rule's really hard to change. Now, the rules and bylaws, co-chairs could work with the DNC chair to come up with some agreement to extend that deadline, and because it's not pushing a rule back, as long as no one in the body complains, then theoretically, I would find that acceptable. If the I think it's he's named Roosevelt. Roosevelt is his name. The guy in charge of these, longtime standing, is one of the, I think it's a descendant of the Roosevelts, as far as I understand it. But he's the co-chair of one of the co-chairs of the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and he released a statement working with Tom Perez that we were moving that date until or a month later because the convention is now moved. I would be okay with that. If they go back and they reopen the rules and they do all this process and they do all this stuff, we run the risk of it just becoming a total fucking nightmare. Technically, what I'm proposing is a little bit bending the rules. See, okay, I'll give you an example. Here's our problem as far as I understand it, and I might have this wrong, so I know the first part I'm going to say is right. The second part I'm still not sure about. I'll tell you the part I'm not sure about. So basically the way it comes down to is like this. The win number, right? The win number is not an actual number. It's an equation, and the equation is 50% of plus one of eligible delegates on each ballot, whatever that is, 50% plus one. So that number changes. So after New York, if New York is late and their delegates get cut in half, the win number goes down by half of the numbers they lost, right? Because there's only two people in the race and 50% plus one. So, well, the two people in the race doesn't matter. But it's 50% plus one. So that win number gets cut into basically, a quarter of the numbers, the total delegates available are cut off of the win number. So the win number is actually going to shrink. But the date for the June 9th date, I think, is arbitrary. I don't think the June 9th date is associated to a greater equation. So, like, for example, when they move the date, it would automatically, like for registration deadlines, for example, in a primary, they're 30 days before, hypothetically, 30 days before the election. If you move the election, usually that's not set to an arbitrary date because elections move. Usually it's set to 30 days before an election. So if the election gets moved, technically re-registration should automatically open. That isn't always true, but generally speaking, that's how it's supposed to work. And you could sue to make that argument, depending on how the law is written in a given state. But the date for June 9th is not written like that as far as I know. I could be wrong. This is where I don't know. I don't know specifically. My understanding is it's not. So this is where it comes to sort of an extreme circumstance of the committee chairs have to come together with the DNC chair, maybe some executive committee, and make like a vote. And as long as there are no objections, usually these are only problems when they shorten things. Like if they tried to bring back superdelegates, that would be kind of problematic. But if they just move this deadline because of the C-19 epidemic, that would be acceptable. So that's the thing, because the DNC, like everyone says, the rules are more of a suggestion, and that's really true. Except that we hold them to these rules, even when they are just a suggestion, because if they can't hold true to the suggestions even, then how can we trust them to be a frontline defense against Republicans, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about. We're talking about frontline defense in a war, a social war of taking away rights or giving people rights. And we can't let the people on the front lines of the war to give people rights be willing to take away people's rights, because that's how the Democratic Party goes about losing its major party status, is because we're in a binary party system. It's not two major parties, it's a binary party system. The reason that's important is because they are two that push against each other. They don't work together. As soon as they start working together, one of them has to go. It's different when you do bipartisan and they meet in the middle, but as soon as one is doing the other one's bidding all the time, like the Democrats will do to the Republicans if progressives don't stay up their butts, then it really is the statement of, do we have two parties? And if we don't, can we make that argument to the public? And depending on what the Democrats do handling their convention, they're making that point to the public. So that's why the 51 state party chairs, and I haven't cross-referenced to figure out which 6 didn't sign it. If anybody wants to do that, it's somewhere on my page from yesterday. I shared Raymond Buckley, the New Hampshire state party chair's post about it. And 51 state party chairs signed a document from, I think it's from Minnesota, from Ken Martin put it together. He's the ASDC chair. He's the guy I worked with for elements of the superdelegate reform. They came out with a piece saying how they supported that people should not be able to choose, should not have to choose between democracy and security or safety. So they're making the point that all, I didn't read it. I need to read it again. I talked about this last time on my stream. I haven't read it as thoroughly as I should have. But the point is, they made this big argument about how that people should be able to vote and voting should be safe, and we shouldn't be doing this thing. Because what's happening in Wisconsin right now is fucking crazy. In Wisconsin, they're pushing forward with it's in their constitution. Apparently, it's an issue, and so they're pushing forward their in-person election. Now they're getting unprecedented vote by mail ballots, but they're threatening that they're getting, like, the Wisconsin government is so fucked up that they're like, no, you can only vote in person. Okay, well, you can vote by mail too. And then so many people sign up for vote by mail. They're threatening not to count those ballots. Not to mention, there's no guarantee on the ballot count we're going to get on election night. So no matter what happens with Wisconsin, it's going to look like they're going to make it look like Bernie got wiped out, and they're only going to count like 5% of the ballots on election night because it's all crazy. And then we're going to have a new outbreak because you got to remember, people are like, well, how long are we going to have to social distance for? We are going to have to social distance for as long as people won't social distance. That's how this works. You have to, like, it's a communicable disease. It has to, well, it's a communicable virus. It has to die out individually in your house, in your body. Hopefully you don't die with it, but that's what has to happen. Try to let people die with it. That's why these numbers where they go, well, this is really kind of a scary number I'm about to bring to everyone. So according to the official numbers, and why we're talking about this virus, just so people can really get, we'll go back to the convention because I'm not done with that. I'm going to make you have to watch quite a bit to get to the part about Joe Biden that I want to get to. Is that we have numbers, this isn't loading for whatever reason. Okay, we have numbers, 1,007,977 confirmed cases, of which 52,771,000 people have died. Now, what is really bad about that, what is really terrifying, is that that's 5%. That's 5%. That's almost exactly 5% of the population. And I said to you guys a while ago that we're looking at a 5% thing, and I was getting really happy because the rate was down to 2.8% until Italy and Spain and USA started having cases that were getting actually recorded, because that's the big thing. We've been having cases. Everyone is starting to realize we've been having cases since November. Like, people are starting to put it together because the first transmission the first sick person in a hospital is November 17th in China. That person is just the first confirmed sick person. That is not the first person that came in sick. That is not the transmission point. That still includes a 2-week incubation period with 5 to 6 days to get get actually sick. So you're looking at like a late October initial whatever happened, and the theory is right now it's a bat that jumped to a pangolin. That apparently the pangolins, people carry them like on their bodies when they traffic them in the black market. So they're saying that the theory is loosely that in somewhere in that operation, because it's not the wet market itself, it's from, they have people that were before the wet market where everything is getting blamed at the moment, even though they are banning wildlife eating, and dogs and cats just got banned as food, and they're really stepping up, at least finally, to protect life. It's crazy the things food is food, but it's kind of wild what they go out and eat in mass. So that's some good stuff that's happening, on that note. But I think that the pangolin to bat thing and how it jumps is really fascinating, but it's dangerous, and it creates this high mortality rate of 5%. And when I put 5% of America is 16.5 million people. I would say right now we're looking at about 2 million people dying in America pretty safely. I think the American government is saying 200,000 with 100,000. It just depends on how bad it blows up here in the next couple of weeks and how many doctors and nurses we lose. Like, we're still having a huge problem with PPE. We're also learning more about how the viral load works. So, like, if you get a little bit of virus in you, you get a little sick. But if you get a lot of virus in you, you get really sick. So, like, healthcare professionals that are working around a lot of patients, it's not like you just get exposed to this once and then you're exposed and I'm exposed. No, you get exposed and then you get exposed and you get exposed, and they compound and they build and they build, and you get more of them and more of them. And that's why doctors are dying that don't have proper PPE, is because they're getting this huge viral load. So this is a whole other issue that's coming of this. It's not like normal viruses in that way. because if your viral load gets too high, it fucking kills you. And that's one of the things we're learning. We're also learning that it absolutely spreads. Like, just if you were in the room with me and I had coronavirus and you were this close to me, you would be catching coronavirus. Just me talking, not even spitting, just me talking. I'm a spitty talker, but this close is all it takes right now. And this is like why they're saying that people need to be wearing masks and all sorts of stuff. So just keep that in mind, guys, as we're moving forward. Take this real seriously. Don't get on that whole, oh, it's not an N95 or it doesn't do the wraparound or what, anything, a bandana, anything to cut your risk and lower your viral load, because the more exposure you have, the higher risk you are, and that's just ultimately where we are. So I do want to talk about someone who else is at high risk, and I don't know if you guys noticed, but a couple weeks ago I've been talking about Biden having something called a TIA. It's a type of, it's like a mini stroke. It's a type of attack. That attack is, I can't remember the actual medical term for it, but you can look it up. It's called a TIA. And people argue over whether or not it's called a mini stroke or not. But basically, when he like forgets what he's doing and he wandered off set and he did a bunch of weird things, those are all TIAs. They're basically leftovers from his brain aneurysm surgery. So it's like a hiccup in the blood in your brain. In your heart, it'd be a heart palpitation kind of, right? Or a hiccup would literally be like a hiccup, but it's like a brain hiccup. And so they were getting worse. And the problem is that TIAs are symptoms of strokes are coming on. So when Biden disappeared for a couple of days, my theory is he actually did have to get his TIA, his brain treated, which is where that brain surgeon talked about the incision and all that sort of stuff. Also why his skin tone is weird. Also why he's only wearing the same suit and everywhere he goes. Also why a lot of things are going on, because there's something weird happening. Biden needed more time. And that's the thing. The neoliberals are trying to do the same thing. Thank you, transient ischemic attack. The neoliberals are trying to do the same thing they did with Hillary, but with a much weaker candidate. Hillary was a bad candidate. We told everyone that she wasn't going to be able to campaign. She didn't have the energy and endurance to go to places. And she literally did not have the endurance to go to places. She literally did not go to states she needed to go to. We were right. We were really right. It didn't matter people showing up. Politics is about personal connection. And if your person cannot make a personal connection because they cannot physically be there, they're not a good candidate. Also, really important to distinguish, president is a full-time job. It's not a job you get to turn on. I mean, Trump is doing a terrible job going golf, doing whatever. Biden couldn't even do that right now. Like, Biden couldn't even, we know it. We know Biden couldn't even do that. So the plan is, the neoliberal plan has been, go behind Biden. And we've talked about this a lot. Get behind Biden. Biden can beat Bernie. Maybe that apparently that appears to be true in some element or another. But Biden can't beat Biden. Like, Biden can't do the whole process. That's why they're trying to cut the primary short. And that's why the state party chair is coming out and saying, no, the primary must continue, because the state party chair's job is to win. So they're not going to want to put up a candidate like Hillary again, but a weaker version of it that's less together. Because, like, energy issues are one thing, but brain issues are a whole other thing. You can come back from energy issues. You cannot come back from brain issues. I mean, you can if you're really young, but no, you can't. He can't come back from this, and they know he can't. So I think that the Democratic Party, you know, like the DNC upper echelon, not all the executive committees, a couple of them are very friendly, but, you know, good portion of like the neoliberals. You got to remember when we're talking. I've been breaking this down in this for a little while for you guys, but the automatic delegates break down into different groups, and they have different power at different times. The DNC, you know, executive body, always very powerful the whole time. They'll say they're not, but they are. The DNC voting body is very powerful in non-primary season. Whenever there's DNC meetings, they're the shit. They make all the big choices. Senate and Congress, all the House, they only get like 1 or 2 reps. They don't get like a 450 votes voting body. Then there's the neolibs that are like secretaries of states, governors, a lot of the Black Caucus. They're really bad. They just are. You can kill me for it later, but it's true. So the point is that those are the ones that really stand in the way of progress. They're all like millionaires or billionaires or something crazy. The guy in Colorado is worth $343 million. We get congressional members. They're all doing insider trading, making tons and tons of money. These are the people that are standing in the way of progress. Now, these people only make up a small part of the body, though. These are the people that are trying to screw over Bernie. These are the people who, because Pete originally, the original rig was with Pete. And Pete's rigging was through the state party chairs, but he only got like 2 or 3, 4 state party chairs, and everyone kind of knew what was going on. So as soon as the first guy got caught, everything fell apart. That's why it was going to be Pete and probably Amy, honestly, at first. And then now they're going to put Biden in, and they're going to try to get Biden, limp him through the primary, and then get Bernie to drop out. This is their mindset because they can't bring superdelegates back. Get Bernie to drop out. Once Bernie drops out, Biden can go silent. This is before COVID-19. Biden can go silent and then pop up at the convention, act confused, and then a week later, they can basically do a vacancy fill. They can basically pull a Dave and say, oh, well, he fell down the stairs or, had sex with a prostitute. That's actually what happens to Dave. And so the story is they can do whatever they want, and they can fill a vacancy. So the DNC board meets. Then but the thing is the process for appointing a vacancy is a little vague because the DNC chair meet with the executive committee, then they meet with the Congress, then they meet with the House. Excuse me, I always break up. They meet with the House, they meet with the Senate, then the DNC body votes. So it's a little unclear if the DNC chooses it or if they mean the DNC voting body. And I think it means the DNC voting body. Now, where this comes around, where I said, okay, these 51 state party chairs signed this document, and what does it mean? Well, and they want the primary to continue. This means that they kind of know Joe Biden is a weak candidate, and they don't want to put Joe Biden up against Bernie. See, the convention process exists for events like Biden remorse, like we're having right now. We're having Biden's remorse, we're having Biden's remorse, okay? Where people are having remorse for choosing Biden because they're realizing that this event has changed, this situation has changed. We need a wartime, and look at all the CEOs, there's this thing going on with the CEOs all changing out last couple of months. That's because they've all changed from a peacetime CEO to a wartime CEO. And this is actually, I believe these are official business terms. And right now, we need a wartime president, but not we've had wartime presidents, everyone said these bullshit wars, but we need a wartime president. Like a real president's going to talk about how are we going to get through this. And I think that the primary exists to test the candidates. I think that if we are getting this 2-month delay and this situation that's not a test, it's a real situation. Like when Trump took over the White House, Obama's team had something called the transition process where they would give them tests. And one of those tests was a worldwide pandemic because we've all known this was coming. This isn't like a random thing. As a matter of fact, we've known about this virus was on the loose for a while. So we just been waiting for it to cross over to humans. We've known it was in bats for a long time. We just hadn't known the pangolin crossover, that no one saw that come. It's very hard to get the bat biting thing doesn't happen that often. It does happen, but it doesn't happen as much as you think. And someone has to be infected with the bat has to be infected with the virus too. So it doesn't happen a ton, but we knew it was going to happen. We knew it was coming. So so this right now, what we're going through is not a test. This is the real thing. This is the real thing. Yeah, I'm going to get to that in 1 second, Dave. Someone said thoughts about installing Cuomo. That's where I'm headed with this. So, so we're getting this test, and people are seeing it in action. We're seeing this enthusiasm gap. We're seeing these young people. Also, this virus disproportionately affects older people. And this is the oldest consistent voting bloc. And this is a terrible thing to think about, but if the Democratic Party wants to continue putting up a fight against the Republicans, they have to have a serious conversation about who their voting bloc is. Because right now, we have no idea how many people are going to die, and I just said 2 million, which is kind of low, considering we have a 5% estimate. So, I mean, not to mention, by the way, if we're talking about putting up Biden, I don't know if you guys caught it, but Trump is talking about expanding Medicare and Medicaid. His exact quote is, let's see if I have it right here. His exact quote is, "It doesn't seem fair that 30 million Americans are uninsured and suggests he may extend Medicare and Medicaid." Like, if he extends Medicare and Medicaid and develops UBI, I don't know if Bernie could beat him. I'm not even joking. I don't know if anyone could beat him if he does this. Doesn't matter how improperly he handled it. If he has a good plan moving forward and just gives the people everything they want, it'll work. It'll so work because the requirements of what this virus is going to create is already the platform that many of us have been fighting for. So if we put Biden up against this, there is a 0% chance of beating Trump. Not to mention, he's not actually less conservative. Right now, Biden is the conservative candidate. If it's there are 3 people in this race right now: Bernie, Trump, and Biden. Biden is the most conservative one. No, it doesn't even matter what he says. Biden isn't. He says, "Can we trust anything he says?" He will change his stance on a dime. He doesn't have a stance. He just lies. Today or yesterday, he got quoted as saying, "What is it? I have it right here. I have 7 grandchildren, and he has 9 grandchildren, or whatever." He got the number of grandchildren wrong. Like, just everything is wrong. He's making up stories. He's telling people he's going to do things he's never had any intention of doing. He's lying about his past. He's acting like people don't have the internet. And that's another reason they need Bernie to drop out, is because people get on the freaking internet and look this stuff up. Everyone's at home right now. They can all take the time. This is like a neoliberal's worst nightmare. So Dave says, I've heard about them installing Cuomo. Thoughts? Okay, so number one, apparently when Jesse Jackson ran, and he got shut down by the weak candidate who no one even remembers their name, they were originally planning on trying to install Cuomo in a contested convention. Now, why this is a neurotic lunacy plan all around is that the voters will not accept a candidate who is not in the primary. The whole point of the primary is to build a candidate up, to prove that they could do it one long election. It's like a year and a half, back up to another 6-month election. So it's like a 2-year election process to become president. Because you're saying you can do 8 years nonstop with very limited breaks. So if you're saying you can do that, you need to be able to do that. And that's what the primary exists for. So neoliberals, they're not concerned about, and I've said this many, many times on my show, they're not concerned about winning the primary. They're more concerned about taking control of the party and re-seizing the assets as consultants. So when we talk about Cuomo, and we talk about installing someone else at the convention, and we talk about all this other stuff, installing someone else at the convention is basically impossible. And I don't think the automatic delegates would let it fly. Also, you got to keep in mind, we have like 130 unpledged, or like 150 unpledged delegates that are on the first ballot. Plus, we have no idea what's going to happen in the rest of this election process. It's possible that if this goes so crazily south that we could see like super delegates brought back to make Bernie win. I mean, things are crazy. Things are crazy right now, and the irony of that would be super thick. It would be super hilarious. That would be the conclusion no one saw coming. If superdelegates get brought back to make sure Bernie wins, because Joe Biden will not. He won't even make it. And if they install another candidate who's not Bernie, he won't make it either. It's going to be a he. It won't be a she. Like, the best thing they could do is do a Pete and Amy, but in order to make that happen, they made Pete drop out too quickly. What they should have done that would have been much smarter and made this a total fuck show is they should have left everyone in the race through Super Tuesday. Bernie would have gotten more of a lead, but I think they really underestimate how bad his campaign was being. I know this is like, I'm very pro Bernie, but his campaign is being run really poorly. And as much as we're blaming like all the candidates backing behind it, a lot of the numbers were already where we thought they were. So though Biden got a huge advantage, it doesn't say that Bernie would have gotten more delegates. Like, it's not like Bernie had a bigger vote gain in Florida compared to everyone else. All those delegates would still be unpledged, or they'd just be aligned to other candidates. Like, that's where kind of like the math on the, well, they all decide to back this other candidate. Yeah, that's why you're losing to Joe Biden, but that's not why we're losing. I mean, we're losing because the election's rigged, and everything's being totally unfair, and things are being closed, and everything's being screwed over, and yeah, that's all totally true. And it's a complete fuckery fuck show, a total fuckity fuck, all the way, absolutely. But we also have our own problems, and when you talk about attrition, you're trying to win an election or control the presidency or save lives, you have to look at it as like, we have to expect a certain amount of fuckery from the other side, and we have to make sure we limit and cut down our fuckery as much as possible. And it just didn't happen. It didn't happen. I think that everyone in my chat at this point knows it didn't happen. If you work for the campaign, you know it didn't happen. That's okay. We can still fix it. We got time. We got 2 more months. We got like a month and a half. But we got elections coming up. We got Wisconsin in a couple of days. We got Alaska deadlines happening right behind that. We have Hawaii deadlines coming up just as quickly. Then we have Wyoming, which the flyover state of flyover states. I drove through it a couple times. Actually, I've been to Wyoming. It's very nice. It's like Arizona of the north. Less orange, more red. Point is that it's kind of like khaki, really. But the point is that we have these elections coming up real fast. We also got Puerto Rico, which might get moved, and we got Ohio right after that. Plus, we got Guam and Kansas going on. We got elections still in April. So I do think that the DNC needs to move the deadline, the June 9th deadline, and I think they need to move the deadline via the Rules and Bylaws Committee and they're going to break the rules to do it. And I think that because the convention's been moved, I think it could be. Yeah, Dave. I know. And people are like, I hope you're right. The pushback against Bernie is strong. I don't trust him either. Don't assume like this is not a like go donate to the DNC conversation. No, donate to me. I need money. But when it comes to what's happening, this is not normal business. This is nothing normal is happening here. Biden was no one's chosen candidate. They're only picking him for the Never Bernie crowd. They thought that he was the safest bet to get behind, Stop Bernie movement. But I told them when they did it, they've made a horrible mistake. Because they didn't think the virus was real. They didn't think the virus was real. They didn't think it would actually delay processes. They didn't think, like, we would get rescued from being internally sabotaged at the last minute. I don't know. I don't make the rules. Well, that one time. But, no, a couple times. Okay, a bunch of times. Look, the point is we're going to make some new rules right now. We got to change some things. Things we got to change. This election date's got to shift. Excuse me, the deadline has to shift. The rest of the election date's got to move. Wisconsin, by the way, just on a random note, Wisconsin calling in the National Guard thing is pretty shocking because I really hope this actually, if anything in my video gets out, probably this is the most important thing. It's totally fucking shocking that Wisconsin would use its like last set of defenders. Because the National Guard, everyone is always like, oh, this means they're locking us down and our rights and blah, blah, blah. No. The National Guard exists to replace police, military, because they're their own military, but military can get sick too. We're seeing that happen. Police, military, other forms of enforcement, fire department, anything that you need to make your system function, the National Guard can fill one of those roles in some way. They're all trained for different stuff, and then if they get beyond that, the Army has to get called in. The Army has to get called in, and I think we changed the law about deploying American soldiers. We used to have a law against deploying American soldiers, but I think Obama got rid of it. And we were all like, hey. But right now, that might actually come in handy. And people are like, oh, martial law. Like, no. Everyone's getting sick. There's going to have to be like, it's only going to be as far as the rioting goes. If people approach this with compassion and we keep our social distancing, any type of martial law exists only for the ass clowns that won't social distance. Like my neighbor, still having people over. Pretty sure he sells drugs. But I'm just saying. Still having people over kind of regularly. It's kind of a thing. And it makes me crazy. Because they're, young and healthy-ish, so they're not going to show anything. So they're out talking to their neighbors, our neighbors who are not healthy and young, putting them at risk. And they just cannot fucking get that you can't go talk to people. You cannot go out and engage. You have to wear masks. You cannot have people in your house. You have to limit your viral load and others. It's going to be a long year. Well, I hope you didn't have any 2020 plans. Everyone's like, this is going to be the best year ever. On the bright side, a lot of people just got saved from their New Year's resolutions. Oh. 68, yeah. I interviewed, I'm still trying to get these interviews out, but we interviewed a woman who was a delegate in Michigan, and she was also in the 1968 riots outside the convention, and she pointed at her scar, I think it was right here, one side of her head, where she had actually had her skull cracked by a cop. So we owe a lot of people a lot of thanks for why Philly wasn't a total disaster, because we tried. Not we, but the movement people. I don't know if they're the movement. I think we're the movement. I think the movement's changed a lot. I think that before we used to have, the movement it's not just about people in the Democratic Party or trying to take over the Democratic Party. There is an inside-outside thing going on. I do want to point that out. I think it's about like the movement is the people who support each other's wins and lift each other up when we lose. I think the movement are those people, right? The movement are all the people that support each other, win or lose. Like the people that are trying to tear down AOC, saying how Bernie sold us out for the thing, for the stimulus bill, it doesn't go far enough. They're not part of the movement. They're something else. That's fine. They're welcome whenever they want. But I think the movement is about supporting each other and building each other up. I think that, at times even I have been on the wrong side of being overly aggressive with people, and it really gives you something to think about. But the big thing here, though, is that we talk about the movement and what it's doing and where it's going and what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that right now, uh, I'm seeing some really fantastic work with changing and it's grassroots initiative, which is always my favorite. People taking initiative and then forcing the campaign to follow, because that's really, we're supposed to be a movement-led campaign, so the movement kind of knows what it's doing. We didn't hire. See, the big problem with the campaign right now is we didn't hire any movement people. None of the people in the campaign are movement-oriented or focused. I mean, there's, of course, it's not a blanket statement, but generally speaking, the majority of people in the campaign don't have a lot of experience with movements, and the social experience, social movements they do have is relatively modern or really old. There's really nothing. There's no healthy in between. A lot of people in campaigns just work so hard to get out of the grassroots as fast as possible that they kind of lose track of what got them there. So I think that the people picking up the slack right now for doing the solidarity calls, that's the idea that is so important. Karen, you said fight for someone you don't know is what we should be all about. And I want people to think about it. My saying before Bernie launched the fight for someone you don't know, I had been saying for a couple of years now, the movement exists to improve the quality of life of people we will never meet. And I don't know if meeting someone on the phone counts, but I think the fighting concept isn't really the right message right now. And I think that that's going to sound like, oh, well, Don, you're kind of being a wimp. But I think fighting for them isn't the right message. I think that the message is improving the quality of life. Right now, we have a quality of life issue, and fighting for someone is a little arbitrary. And we can also forget that fighting with someone can end up fighting with someone. Fighting for someone can end up being fighting with someone. And so, whenever you're into this fighting mentality, you lose sight of the improving the quality of life aspect. Because I have to think about right now, if I'm going to complain about something and say, oh, there's this problem. Or for example, I made a statement a minute ago where I said there aren't a lot of movement-oriented people. And I stop myself and go, that's a blanket statement, and that's not really appropriate because there are people in the campaign who are very movement-oriented, and I've just erased them. And that's not appropriate to them, and I've hurt someone. If someone saw that, and I said that, and I'm talking about them, that would hurt them. Now, there are some people who are fucking dumbasses that need to get stung a little bit because they're fucking us over, but that's a different story. It's Karen, that's true. Quality of life, but yeah, I'm talking about the fighting for Medicare for all. That's true, but we don't really need to fight for Medicare for all necessarily right now as much as we did before because it's happening. I mean, we need to push for it, but fighting isn't necessarily the answer because we need health care. Everyone's talking about, Trump is talking about expanding Medicare. Now is the time to push and drive the issue totally. But that's still improving the quality of life of people we don't know. And I'm saying it from the perspective of an attitude adjustment. If I think the attitude of fighting is the wrong attitude, but the attitude of improving is the right attitude. I think I got it on this one. I was really careful about because I definitely feel like the Bernie campaign, this is going to be a little hard for some people to hear, but Drea and some of these people who've known me a long time, the Bernie campaign tries really hard to erase me, and they basically copy the things that I do or duplicate them and make them like a similar version of it. And they did that to me with this fighting for people you don't know. Maybe Bernie's been saying this for years, but I've never heard him say it. I've never read it in anything. I've never heard it brought up as an issue. I've been saying this line for years, and then suddenly it's this idea that they have advertised on everyone, and it felt like it was erasing what I was saying. So I kind of sat back and let it play out because Bernie, I don't think Bernie actually came up with that. I think a bunch of young people sitting in his office came up with that. And I don't know. Maybe it is all him. Maybe it is. I don't know. I can't speak for anyone. All that I know is that it doesn't hold up. It's not holding up. The original one holds up better. And I think that is an attitude issue that we really have to be mindful of. And this is where our leaders are our leaders, and we trust them to lead on certain elements and see the big picture. But I mean, it was only yesterday that we finally got Bernie's team to send out a tweet for the Wisconsin vote by mail ballots. I mean, we've been talking about this stuff for weeks. The deadline's been going on for months. And they sent out a tweet yesterday. I've been live streaming about it as much as I can, and I've been slandered relentlessly into the ground. I mean, if I hadn't been slandered in the ground, people would have been more prepared for COVID-19 because we were talking about it in January. We were talking about COVID-19 when Trump was getting briefed on it. And people were like, oh, Don, oh, I don't know, oh, I don't know. I was like, the superdelegate reform is real. People were like, oh, Don, I don't know. Pretty much everything I said except for that something I said about Beto wasn't real. That was total bullshit. I just said that to make everyone feel better for the day. But other than that, everything has turned out to be real. So at this point, I'm just at this point of we really need to get on top of this slander issue inside the movement because we need to be working together, and we're limiting our ability to improve the quality of life of people that we don't know, or are limiting our ability to fight for strangers because we are cutting people out of conversations and driving them out of things because people are more interested in being famous than they are about being effective. And I think at this point, if everyone's so afraid of like me having bigger ideas and them not being famous because of it, I have done a shit job with my good ideas trying to be famous. I'm just trying to have good ideas and try to keep this fucker moving. We are at risk of losing years of work. It will be nearly impossible to build ourselves back up right now. Everyone knows this. The neoliberals are pushing so hard to wipe us out. I mean, we had to basically freeze the entire convention process, which is still going to happen in some degree, just to stop the losses of our gains from last time, because the neoliberals are pushing so hard. So our really only hope is like this goes two ways. Either the party leadership steps in and the automatic delegates, which they're doing, by the way. It's not an if. This is already happening. They're already doing it. And they're my friends on Facebook. They see my posts. I'm friends with like 10 state party chairs. So it's not like they don't know what we're talking about or seeing the videos. We're going to need them to step in and set this right, because even like we can't even trust the legitimacy of these votes. Like if I had my way, and I might do this if we have a physical convention, but if we have a physical convention, I am going to go to the it's credentials, I believe. It's either credentials or it's one of the fucking three committees. The point is, you go to one of them and you do a challenge. And anyone that held elections in the middle of a pandemic should have their delegates cut in half. Florida, Illinois, and Arizona were not legitimate elections. Wisconsin is not going to be a legitimate election. They are not being managed or handled at a level that is expected of the DNC process, because the neoliberals are trying to shove it down everyone's throats. But the whole thing's going to backfire, because it's like in 2016, they knew they had planned for Bernie to be out by the Nevada Nevada County Convention. The Nevada County Convention. And we know that because they had no plan for the 20% of delegates who did not have ballots from the caucus night, because they were found out, and then we got all Bernie-crats in those positions because it was like the one time ever we used the texting system properly, because I tricked them sort of into doing it on their own. And so we're seeing the same thing now, where they're trying to rush through this process, and it's all built on the idea that they have to get Bernie to quit. If Bernie doesn't quit, like people are saying, oh, well, if Bernie doesn't quit, it doesn't mean he's automatically the second choice. It literally means he's automatically the second choice. It is literally what it means. So, and I think that going to the rules and bylaws people with the position of that these delegates should get cut in half, I think it's something. They do open the rules of the convention, and that is something that can be addressed. So what they can do, Alexander, is they can propose a pre-rule change saying that at the convention they will extend the deadline to maintain the delegate process, so the delegates wouldn't actually be cut down, even though for the month between the election happening, the convention, technically they would be, but as soon as the convention goes through, then they'd be counted as normal, and then everything would go. That could happen. I don't think it'd be very good with the media, because we're running a problem with the media working with the neoliberals, and this is where things get complicated for the party leadership to figure this out, is because the media is trying to cram this through. So those like month and a half, 2 months, I haven't looked at the calendar how long it actually is, but April, May, June, July, so wait. June 2nd, end of June, July, August, 2 months, right? So it's just 2 months. So those 2 months between the election and the thing where they are cut down, the neoliberals would still be trying to cram Joe Biden down our throats. Even if he had like lost every election, they would be saying, oh, well, this means this, and this is what's going on, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and trying to like change public opinion. And then, see, what the media does is really makes everyone fucking sick. It's super grossed out, is that they basically leave the door open for neolibs to neolib, and basically like, well, it has been changed, but it could get changed back at any minute. You know how these rules are. And they say these abstract ideas about like what can happen and what can't, because they don't know. And if they can make it happen, they just want the public to be convinced that everything is fine, so they'll go along and keep taking their pills and keep going to work. So, this is why I said that the whole plan is like going to backfire massively, and I think it is, and I think that if the party leadership, this is where I said they had two options. Number one, they step in and do something. That's possible. Number two, because this is what they exist for. They exist for this process, to step in and do something on this. Good to see you too, Dave. If you guys are working, please consider making a donation. Things are very tough, and we do have to keep going. Just putting that out there, guys. Small donations, all through PayPal. It's all on the link. I know people are hard right now, and they don't have a lot of money, whatever. But I have to keep asking. I got to keep driving because it's a new month and a new thing and a new deadline. So, cannot express enough, though, how much they fucked up by picking Joe Biden and how much their whole plan is built on Bernie dropping out. So we should be looking into making a challenge of the credentials or whichever committee it is. It's credentials, bylaws, rules and bylaws, credentials, and the other one that I'm forgetting. It's only 3, Don. You'd think you'd get it. But, yeah, let's see. What does this say? Wouldn't that have to be input motion? No, that goes into the convention. You put it in earlier, absolutely. You could put it away. The Bernie campaign could absolutely find some type of motion with the DNC pushing to have every delegate count reduced. For discuss though until a little. Yeah, Perez and the DNC. No, you can't. You gotta skip. No, Alexander, you gotta stop looking at it as the DNC. The automatic delegate body breaks down into different groups. The DNC is actually the group that is probably going to end up more on our side when this is over. The automatic delegates that are not a part of the DNC, they're the people trying to fuck us over. They're secretaries of states, governors, members of Congress. They're a whole lot of trouble. They are the neoliberals, okay? When they say that Biden has 175 automatic delegates backed up behind him, those are those people. There's about 200 of them. They're very obnoxious. There are there's about 300 of them. There's 450 DNC voting body members. The DNC voting body members are also automatic delegates, but they are a different type of automatic delegates because they're voted in a different way. So inter-party elections are different than how your state elections and federal elections operate to elect the automatic delegates that are non-voting members. I'm sorry this is so confusing, but there's no terminology for it. I have to just sort of like relate these conceptually to each other, and then you guys can kind of get it. So it's like there's the voting body, there's the executive committee, which is also part of the voting body, and then there's the automatic delegates, and they only get represented in the voting body by one representative for the whole group. So it's like there's one guy for the Secretary of States, there's one guy for the governors, there's one, I think they get 2 or 3. I've seen the charts. I mean, I have a chart. I can take a peek at it and really get a look if you want if you actually want the real answer. But speaking of, as soon as I say, oh, I guess I could look it up, Jason Eno shows up. Thanks, Jason. So nice to see you. So yeah. So when it comes to the convention and what's happening, I don't think this hurts or helps. I think it just makes it different. I think it helps us. Oh, well, this is why it does really help us. It does really help us because. So we have a convention in August. So it's August, September, October, not even November, beginning of November we vote. So we have 2 months from the convention, which is tight, okay? This has not been moved. They're going to blame, like if Biden wins the convention and loses to Trump, which he will, they're going to blame Bernie. But moving the convention is already made it extremely challenging if you don't have an exciting candidate. If you don't have a candidate people are pumped about, and with a new base, because your old base is kind of going to get hospitalized, and there's not a lot for that anyone can go. So, it just doesn't give enough time, and there's definitely not enough time to fit another candidate in. So all this talk about getting Cuomo in, all this talk about cramming some other contested convention candidate in, not going to happen. The idea of filling a vacancy now is impossible. You can't fill it. 3 months is pretty impossible. 2 months, literally impossible. You can't do it. And no one's going to go along with it now. None of the executive committee, none of the other people. It changes the whole thing. And this is where it all comes back around to Biden's got to like make it through the whole thing, but at the same time, we're talking about 200 people versus 450 people, right? And even if Biden has a real good lead, you're still looking at, let's say Biden does need to get replaced because he can't continue, because he fucking can't. Then again, you can't replace it with somebody who wasn't in the primary. So though the rules do not say that Bernie would be the other candidate, it's just that the DNC is the voting body. So the final decision for the vacancy filling, it falls on the voting body members that are more concerned with winning, and the neoliberals get almost no say in it. So the neoliberals are super important during the primary, and that's why they're making this fucking so hard. That's why it makes it feel like they're pulling our teeth out every minute. The media's hitting us, the thing is hitting us, the people, the trolls are online are hitting us because they just have unlimited money to just hammer us for their tax whatever nonsense. They're trying to keep alive a system that we are watching crumble regardless because of the C-19 outbreak. So, So they're like hammering this idea, but once it's over, once the primary is over, they have like no fucking power. They have no choice in filling a vacancy. They have no power in what happens during the general election. They are very limited involvement with the coordinated campaigns. They are basically out of the picture. And that's why they're flexing on us so hard to make us be like, oh, maybe Bernie should drop out because this is really hard. And I didn't realize challenging the establishment would be so difficult. I think they really underestimate how much free time we all have. Especially now. So, we gotta wrap the last 10 minutes here. We gotta wrap this up. So, I think this puts us in a much stronger position than it feels like. I think that this puts Bernie in the position to be pretty much the only candidate if anything happens to Biden. And then there's still the potential that he could actually win the election on his own merit. There is a lot of underhanded backstabbing going on. There's still a lot of sabotage inside the campaign. There's still a ton of trouble getting the campaign to switch to solidarity calls. There's still, I mean, I don't want to make it seem like we're all in, honeymoon territory all of a sudden. There are still a lot of problems. But I think that this puts us in a strong position that if we fix the problems, we could win the election. If we don't fix the problems and we keep acting like everything is fine, then we're almost certainly going to lose, and then twice, and then 3 times. Because if Trump does win the presidency again, he's basically going to become Bernie Sanders in office. And that's going to sound like, Don, what do you mean? Well, he's basically going to have to do every social policy that Bernie Sanders has been pushing. And so all the things that Bernie is going to run on, Trump is going to get credit for. Now, see, the neoliberals might like that. They might think that's great because it kills our movement. But it also kills the party. Because the Democratic Party can't be... See, this is where you can text message and other things. Not really much, by the way, Karen, because you're wondering. Sorry, he sent me off a little bit on that. The point is there's Trump basically stands to basically install. So the neoliberals are more interested in killing the movement than winning the general election. Trump will give them all the benefits that they want, and they don't give a shit about the environment anyways. So, whatever to them. Trump will basically just take up all of Bernie's issues because he's going to have to. Because whoever's going to be president next, the thing about Biden that scares me is whoever's the president next has to take up every issue Bernie is fighting. We have to have a jobs plan. We have to restart the economy. We have to redistribute currency. We have to do all this stuff that's really, really complicated that Biden will absolutely not handle properly. Trump will handle it properly because he'll handle it improperly at first, then eventually do the right thing. And then there'll still be fuckery in the midst of it. But it'll still be better than what Biden would do because he does care about popularity. Biden doesn't give a shit. Popularity? Why do I care? Vote for someone else, Jack. So I do feel that Trump would do a better job in that regard, and I think we're getting that demonstrated on how they would handle this stuff. When Biden is saying, I still have not changed my perspective. My eye is so itchy. Failing the corona test. If Biden is still saying that he hasn't changed his mind about Medicare for all, but Trump is saying that he's thinking about expanding Medicare and Medicaid, well, we have a fucking problem. And that's where the neoliberals are like, well, we could just let Trump win again, and then we'll take over the party, we'll run that motherfucker into the ground. Basically, they'll leech off it like vampires, like they already do. We just got them out of there, basically, because they fucked Hillary up so bad that we were able to just, to everyone, got rid of a lot of them. So people are complaining with the DNC, have no idea how bad it really was beforehand. And no one really does, because nobody's allowed to see any of the paperwork. But anyways, so they basically let Trump win. They let him take up all these policies. They suck the DNC dry. They turn it into a corporate party. And at this point, they lose their major party status. And what I've been saying to chairs lately, and I always have to check to make sure they kept my friend status after I said it, is that, you know, the Democratic Party is really at risk of losing its major party status, because you don't lose your major party. It's not like a trigger. It's not like a Jedi Master. Well, it is actually. It's like being a Jedi Master. Everyone determines you're a Jedi Master. You don't get to call yourself a Jedi Master. The Jedis call you a Jedi Master in a completely made-up world. In a similar made-up world of politics, you don't get to decide you're a major party. Other people decide you're a major party. And if other people decide you're no longer a major party, then you do what is known as lose your major party status. Now, at this point, a couple things can happen. Number one, a new party, god dang, I don't know what's going on, it's so itchy. A new party could emerge, hypothetically, but it won't be a third party. If you say to me, darn, it's time to start a third party, get the fuck out of my live stream. I've been saying it over and over and over again. You don't start a third party, you start a major party. We are in a binary party system. So if there's an opening in the binary party system, why the fuck would you start a third party? Start a major party. So and you may be like, oh, well, what's the distinction? One's called a third party. One is called a major party. One is basically a book club for your buddies, and one is an actual something that might get to write some legislation. My book club does a lot of legislation, okay? So, the point I'm trying to make here is that the party still has to transform. So what you do is you take all the good parts of the Democratic Party, all the parts that are functional that the neoliberals haven't poisoned, and when they poison things to the extreme, you'll get a real sense of who is what, which we kind of already did in 2016, but doing it again would be really easy. Because traveling around is cheap. In the right circumstances. So basically, you transform the party by pulling on its best pieces and then reestablishing what you want it to do and how you want to do it and gaining public support. So you have to have a transition of, as they lose public support, that you have to gain public support. And if they fuck this up and the state party chairs don't step in and don't do something, which they're, like I said, they're already starting to do, but we need more. They don't take that further, then they're at risk of being torn apart and the entire Democratic Party collapsing. And that's going to be a really dark 5 to 10 years while we get our shit back together. And the thing is, the neoliberals are still going to be running candidates. We're going to have attrition losses. They're going to be running like ad campaigns against us at a whole other level. Like, you know what I mean? It's going to be a whole other thing. But I think that coming out of this quarantine that we're on, this like super long lockdown that, again, is going for as long as people don't quarantine, I think that everyone's frame of reference is going to change. You know, the perspective on how you look at life is going to change. So I think that we need to build on that and jump on this in that moment. I think that coming at it with that from an organic response is the most powerful thing we have right now, because they could throw, I think we learned this with Bloomberg, and I really tried to make this point to everyone at the time, but you can throw basically unlimited money at people, but it doesn't change how they vote. They vote for things they're familiar with and comfortable with. Bernie scares people because a revolution is not what people want. They don't want things to change. But the thing is that everything is changing. And this is a good time for a revolution. And that's something that people have to accept. Because the things that they're holding on to, the things that they're maintaining, the things that they think are going to go back to normal in a month aren't. These people talking about their rental, oh, well, my rental, it's where I make all my money. And I'm like, well, then you shouldn't have all your money be made off investments. A rental housing is an investment based on the idea that we are not at war dealing with a plague or some type of virus or any of these number of issues that threaten your investment risk, and this happens to be one of them. So it's just the whole conversation on that we need to readjust what our society is for. Does our society exist for creating profit, or does society exist for creating improvements in quality of life? And I think that if we're going to call ourselves the richest nation in the world, which is a total hyperbolic statement in the first place because we just create money, is that everyone should have enough. Everyone should have more than enough. Like, there's no reason. The idea of scarcity is total bullshit. It's just late-stage capitalism where they're trying to charge as much as possible for something they pay as little as they can to make. That mentality shouldn't exist. Now, should people still be allowed to profit and create business and make stuff and become millionaires? Absolutely. Should people become billionaires? No. I think you definitely have a cutoff at a certain thing. Should a corporation be allowed to be a billionaire? No. Also, I think that a corporation should be allowed to have $1 billion in assets in like physical property, but should a corporation be allowed to have $1 billion cash on hand? No, but I think they should have a year's worth of paying salaries for emergencies on hand. I think there should be some, amount of savings they should be able to have that doesn't have to be reinvested, so they're not a nonprofit. That's how I know the beanie's going on my hour. There should be something, but the way we've been doing it, the mode of putting this profits over people thing, it's done. It's over. Can you see how delicate the beanie thing is? Now I have to end my live stream. I can't get my beanie right. So, it's because it's mirrored. It doesn't. The Zoom isn't mirrored, and this is. It makes it very hard. Okay, so I'm gonna go because I'm being ridiculous. I'm gonna talk about this more. I'm feeling a lot better, by the way. A lot of people were concerned about me feeling sick. I was sick. I don't know if it was COVID-19. I do know that I've had every symptom in a range. Like I feel like I've had multiple types of it. Like it feels like I had one type of COVID that was in my head. I had another type that was in my chest. I had another type that was in the other places we don't talk about, and they all felt a little different. So I cannot make it clear enough to take care of yourself. Get a mask. Take it seriously. Yeah. Jason Nina says rental properties or the stock market are fine as investments. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Just accept the loss. I think that's really the truth. Is that you lose a 100-year pandemic is when you might lose in your rental agreements. So bummer. I feel bad, but not really. Because what about all the people who can't make investments? Like I don't have any money to invest. What is that like? Um, so on that note. Look, guys, if you like what I'm doing, you want me to keep doing it, you can either send the Critical Report a like, send Progressive Insider a like. We're going to have a bunch of Progressive Insider stuff coming out. We're doing a whole lineup. That's why I'm doing this show at 3 o'clock. We're doing a whole thing. More shows, more content, more people, more interviews, more stuff. Hopefully you'll like it. Definitely going to set up another COVID-19 thing soon. But please consider making a donation or becoming a Patreon donor. I know this is a really hard time, but it's a hard time. There's no other way to say it. It's a hard time for all of us. So I hope everyone stays cool, and I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be around.